And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska marine weather outlook for this weekend. We start off with the sea ice, and the ice is extensive across the far north along the Arctic coast, down through the Chukchi Sea. And earlier this past week, there had been some openings in the water there, but those are filling in, though some stronger winds will develop Saturday into Sunday along areas of the northwest coast, especially between Point Hope and Point Lay. But otherwise, we are seeing the ice growth increasing through the Bering Strait and into northern parts of the Bering, and also along areas of the southwest coast, the YK deltas, though we are going to have a pretty strong system lift up out of the eastern Aleutians into Kuskokwim Bay and into the lower Yukon Basin as we go through the day on Saturday. And we are seeing some ice here, upper Cook Inlet, pretty typical for this time of year. Blast of wind, though, may keep the ice breaking up here in Bristol Bay, at least for a while. But otherwise, here's a scenario. Later tonight into early Saturday morning, we have one low that's weakening, the one responsible for snow that fell in Anchorage on Friday. And then over here, this low just north of the eastern Aleutians, northeast of Dutch Harbor, will track northeastward toward Kuskokwim Bay and then across Bethel and through the lower Yukon Delta and then across Norton Sound before that weekends on Sunday. And that'll be the main weather player coming up. The front, as it works its way inland, will have a band of snow and gusty winds. The stronger winds also extending into the Gulf after coming into Bristol Bay and along the especially upper portions of the Alaska Peninsula. And then as we go into Sunday, the low will have taken a track across the lower Yukon and then up across Norton Sound and gradually weaken, though. Pressure gradient here along the area near Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, will produce some strong gusty winds over the course of the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. We find here's a low, weakening low out over the northern Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula by Sunday. That could produce some additional snowfall early Sunday across south central areas, with another low sitting down here in the North Pacific and yet another fairly strong low west there of the Aleutians, western Aleutians. So an active weather pattern will continue here leading up into the Christmas holiday. In the meantime, though, this weekend, Saturday, southeast south winds 10-15 knots, inner channels of the Panhandle waves 2 to 3 feet. For the outer areas, we are looking nearshore waters of the Gulf Coast, eastern Gulf Coast. South to southeast winds could be as high as 30 knots to increasing to 40 knot gales near Cape Suckling, and waves building 8 to as high as 15 feet there as you get out more toward the north central Gulf. And then for Sunday, the winds arrive. We expect southeast to south winds 25 to 30 knots, gust as high as 40 knots within Stevens Passage. Waves 5-6 feet for the inner channels. For the outer coast nearshore waters, winds are going to be west to southwest, 35 to near 40 knot gales, especially in the vicinity of Sitka. Waves 13 to 16 feet. And along the northwestern Gulf coast, we expect strong winds Saturday as that frontal boundary works its way northeastward. Kennedy entrance there to Cook Inlet, 45 knot easterly gales, 35 knot easterly gales off of the Kenai, 40 to 45 knot easterly gales with 14-foot waves there at Hinchinbrook entrance, 30 knot winds with 7-foot waves in Prince William Sound, and then down the length of Cook Inlet, look for north to northeast winds 30 to 40 knots, strongest through the lower half of Cook Inlet, and waves 7 to 11 feet. By Sunday, winds not quite as strong. We're going to see more of a southwesterly wind flow because of the frontal system and trough lifting northward. So we expect southwest winds out over the northwestern Gulf, 25 knots, waves 10 to 12 feet. South winds to 25 knots within Prince William Sound, 6-foot waves. And then south to southwest winds 25 to 30 knots down the length of Cook Inlet with waves of 6 to 9 feet, highest near the entrance. Across Kodiak Island on Saturday, look for southeast to east gales to 35 knots. Otherwise, 30 to 35 knot winds down the length of the Alaska Peninsula. Saturday, winds will be generally out of the southwest to west, strongest through some of the gaps with waves 10 to 15 feet on the North Pacific side. and anywhere from 8 within Bristol Bay to 13 to 17 feet north of Cold Bay. By Sunday, winds will come down. Look for southwest winds to 30 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island. Waves there 9 feet, Shelikof Strait, 11 east of Akiak. Otherwise, west winds 20 to 25 knots down the length of the Alaska Peninsula. Waves will fall off 6 to 8 feet here south of Sand Point and False Pass, generally running 9 to 10 feet from Cold Bay up into where there is open water in Kuskokwim Bay. The Aleutians Saturday will generally have westerly winds, 25 to 30 knots, and waves running on the North Pacific side right around 12 to 15 feet, and then 9 to as high as 15 feet here over the eastern Aleutians on Saturday in the wake of that low pressure. And then for Sunday, we're anticipating west to southwest winds 25 to 30 knots, eastern and central Aleutians turning back toward the south and increasing to 35-knot gales west of Kiska, where waves could build as high as 12 to 14 feet. Along the southwest coast Saturday, that area of low pressure is going to be tracking in toward Kuskokwim Bay and then up toward Bethel and in through the lower Yukon basin by the time we get into Saturday night. And so winds ahead of it, easterly 30 knots there, Bristol Bay, southeast 25 knots, Kuskokwim Bay, but then they shift to the west 25 knots around St. Paul. And as we go further north along the Yukon Delta and in through Norton Sound, we have ice in place with brisk northeasterly 25 to 30 knot winds. For Sunday, as the low weakens and lifts up to near Nome up the southern Seward Peninsula, we anticipate westerly winds 25 knots into Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, and St. Paul. Waves could be as high as 10 feet back towards St. Paul and St. George, or I should say St. Matthew Island. And then winds coming into the lower Yukon Delta, we expect 25 to 30 knot westerly winds, though there is ice in place there. And looking in the farther north and coming through the Bering Strait, winds through the Bering Strait, northeast 25 knots to as high as northerly 30 knot winds on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. Waves there 4 to 6 feet. As we go up along the northwest coast, easterly winds off of Wainwright, but kind of a mixed bag of 10 knot winds along the Beaufort Sea Arctic coastline, and with plenty of ice there in place. Now, later Saturday into Sunday, the winds are going to increase as the weakening low pressure pushes up into the southern part of the Seward Peninsula. Northeast winds increase as high as 40-knot gales around Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, especially to Point Lay, where there will be more in the way of some considerable blowing snow in this area. And ice, though, is in place, and as the winds turn down through the Bering Strait, look for northerly winds 25 to as high as 35-knot gales from the north there at Gamble with waves of 6 to 7 feet.